For millennia, humanity has maintained a nearly fixed conception of the afterlife. Heaven as a realm of light, reward, and eternal peace, and hell as a domain of fire, torment, and unending punishment. These images have existed as clear opposing extremes, forming a seemingly simple moral framework in which virtue is rewarded and vice is punished. Within this worldview, death appears as an absolute boundary. Once the door closes, the soul's fate is immediately determined, leaving no room for change or ambiguity. It is precisely this simplicity and finality that allowed such beliefs to persist across generations, easily understood and widely accepted. Yet, when one delves deeper into ancient texts, lesser-known traditions, and interpretations outside mainstream doctrine, a different and far more complex picture emerges. It challenges the straightforward notion of immediate reward or punishment, and instead raises a question that strikes at the very foundation of human understanding. Where does the soul truly go after death? Is it immediately judged, or is there a journey, a process, that ordinary humans cannot fully comprehend? Are heaven and hell genuinely separate realms, or do they exist as different states within a larger, unified reality? Within the context of such questions, the story of Enos, Enoch, appears as a uniquely enigmatic account. Unlike the prominent figures often emphasized in religious traditions, neither a powerful king nor a famed prophet with grand prophecies, Enos makes only a fleeting appearance in Scripture, yet his brief presence carries a detail that commands attention. He walked with God, and then he was no more. There was no death in the ordinary sense, no grave, no concluding mark as with other humans. This disappearance is not merely a curious anomaly, but opens a profound gap in human perception, a space that extra-biblical and lesser-known writings attempt to fill with a story that is more intricate and philosophically provocative. In these texts, Enos does not merely vanish, he is taken away. Not in a dream, not through imagination, but on a deliberate journey across dimensions inaccessible to ordinary humans. This defines his special role. He is not merely a saved soul, but a seer. The distinction is crucial because it shifts the focus from miraculous preservation to conscious experience, from being taken to being shown and understanding. Enos's journey, therefore, is not a straightforward ascent to a singular, radiant and perfect heaven, as popular imagination might suggest. Rather, he is guided through multiple layers of reality, regions of light that are not entirely peaceful, silent spaces so profound they evoke unease, and intermediary zones where souls exist in a state of waiting. Each area possesses its own characteristics, operates according to its own logic, as though all are components of a pre-existing system, a system neither chaotic nor random but structured, ordered, and purposeful. Here, Enos's role becomes clearer. He is not a passive observer, he is a witness to hidden realities. What he sees is not merely symbolic or fantastical imagery, but systematic descriptions, suggesting that the afterlife is not an abstract concept, but a structured mode of existence governed by principles beyond ordinary comprehension. This shifts the focus from belief to cognition, from imagination to exploration. However, the uniqueness of Enos's journey lies not only in what he sees, but in why he sees it. Why him? Why not someone more powerful, renowned, or historically influential? This question has no definitive answer, yet its ambiguity opens a deeper line of thought. Perhaps Enos is chosen not because of status or influence, but because of his nature, his way of living, his mode of being, and his connection to the divine. But even that alone is not entirely convincing. If mere righteousness were sufficient, why are there not more witnesses like him? A deeper possibility emerges, one more profound and unsettling. Enos is chosen not to be saved, but to act as a bridge of perception between two realms. He is meant to witness what ordinary humans are not yet ready or allowed to understand, which is why his story is never fully revealed in mainstream accounts. It exists at the periphery of knowledge, in the shadowy margins of history, accessible only to those who actively seek it. From this point, Enos's journey transcends a mere mystical narrative of the afterlife. It becomes a challenge to how humanity understands life and death. If a system truly exists beyond death, if there are layers souls must traverse, if there are states where they confront themselves before judgment occurs, then death is no longer a simple endpoint. It is a transition, a passage into a more complex reality where all actions, choices, and experiences continue to exist in another form. At this juncture, the original question resurfaces, but with far greater weight. Where does the soul truly go after death? The question is no longer merely about a location, but about a journey, a state, and, more profoundly, about the manner in which one has lived in the present. Enos's story transforms a theoretical inquiry into a lived reflection, prompting readers to consider not only what happens after death, but what their lives mean within the broader, unseen framework of existence. As Enos continued his journey beyond the familiar boundaries of life, the world he encountered defied conventional expectations. Heaven, as described in the texts, was far from a singular, idyllic domain of eternal bliss. It was not merely a radiant sanctuary where all souls enjoyed undisturbed peace. Instead, it revealed itself as a multi-layered reality, composed of distinct strata, each with its own character, purpose, and atmosphere. Some layers were bathed in brilliant light, yet that brilliance did not equate to absolute tranquility. The light illuminated the existence of order, yet the soul could sense subtle tensions, quiet mysteries lurking beneath the surface, as though each level contained lessons or truths not immediately apparent. The clarity of the illumination did not remove complexity. Rather, it highlighted the intricate interactions among the layers, suggesting that the so-called paradise was a carefully arranged system rather than a static reward. Other layers conveyed a profound stillness, a silence so deep it could feel almost oppressive. This quiet was not emptiness, but a presence that hinted at hidden structures, unseen forces, and the weight of cosmic order. Within these tranquil spaces, souls might not actively experience torment, yet they were never entirely at ease. The stillness itself seemed to demand attentiveness, introspection, and recognition of truths that the human mind might ordinarily avoid. The underlying implication was clear. Heaven, in Enos's account, was not a passive reward, but a dynamic environment with rules, hierarchies, and boundaries, where every element played a role in the broader structure of existence. The serenity that one might superficially associate with paradise was, in fact, intertwined with challenges that required perception, reflection, and understanding. Enos observed that the system governing these heavenly layers was precise and logical, with laws and structures operating consistently across all levels. Every entity, every space, every occurrence seemed integrated into an overarching framework, demonstrating that the afterlife was not arbitrary or chaotic. It was a meticulously organized continuum, where order prevailed even in regions that appeared mysterious or even unsettling. Each soul encountered spaces appropriate to its own nature and development, indicating that advancement or passage through these layers depended not solely on moral righteousness, but also on readiness, awareness, and alignment with the underlying principles of the cosmic system. Within this grand design, Enos came upon the intermediary zones, the so-called waiting areas, neither fully luminous nor engulfed in darkness, and distinct from both heaven and hell. These zones were peculiar in their essence. Souls within them were not punished, yet they were not granted full freedom either. They existed in a state suspended between presence and movement, a liminal space where normal concepts of time had no meaning. Days and nights, beginnings and endings were irrelevant. There was only the continuum of conscious experience, unbroken and enduring. In this environment, a soul's attention naturally turned inward, for it was in these zones that self-perception became unavoidable. Here, the individual could not escape the reality of prior choices, actions, or intentions. The medium itself compelled awareness, and it was this awareness that constituted the first encounter with judgment. The implications of this intermediary state were profound. Unlike traditional depictions of immediate reward or punishment, these waiting zones introduced a temporal dimension to post-mortem experience. Judgment was not instantaneous. It unfolded gradually in a space where the soul confronted itself with clarity. The environment was neither threatening in a physical sense nor coercive. Instead, it created conditions for recognition and comprehension. Enos witnessed souls oscillating between acceptance and uncertainty. Some appeared at peace, having reconciled with what awaited them and understanding their place within the grand design. Others displayed apprehension or fear, not because of external torment, but because the weight of self-knowledge and the inevitability of subsequent judgment became unmistakably present. This intermediary state functioned as a preparatory phase, an essential step in the transition toward final placement within the broader system of the afterlife. It served as a mirror, reflecting back the soul's own nature, actions, and accumulated understanding, requiring confrontation with inner truths before progression could occur. In essence, it was a period of existential calibration, a phase where the soul adapted, adjusted, and comprehended the principles governing its ultimate position. The experience emphasized that posthumous reality was relational and developmental, rather than punitive or arbitrary. The journey itself, and the way a soul engaged with it, became an inseparable part of the outcome. Enos's observations highlighted the remarkable intricacy of these zones. While external observers might mistake these intermediary areas for simple waiting rooms or passive spaces, their function was far more critical. They provided a space in which consciousness itself became a tool of discernment. The soul, moment by moment, confronted its own essence, its choices, and its limitations. In doing so, it was neither rewarded nor punished in the immediate sense. It was being prepared to face what lay ahead with awareness and authenticity. The system operated with a precision that balanced justice and comprehension, suggesting that the mechanics of the afterlife were guided by intelligence and order rather than caprice. In this view, heaven was revealed as a structured, multi-layered reality where light and mystery coexisted, while intermediary zones ensured that no soul approached ultimate judgment unprepared. The entire system, from radiant layers to silent waiting areas, functioned as a continuum. The journey of the soul was gradual, sequential, and designed to cultivate perception and understanding, creating a profound link between the nature of the soul and the environment it encountered. The afterlife was not simply a matter of being placed somewhere based on a single act or belief, but was a process in which the soul's qualities, decisions, and insights determined the trajectory and pace of its progress. By observing these layers and zones, Enos gained insight into a universe far more sophisticated than the simple dichotomy of reward and punishment. He understood that what many had assumed to be immediate and absolute was, in fact, an intricate and deliberate system that required engagement, introspection, and participation from the soul itself. The interplay of light, silence, and suspended existence highlighted that heaven was not merely a final destination, but an evolving structure, and that intermediary zones were critical spaces where understanding, self-recognition, and readiness were cultivated. These observations underscored a central truth of the narrative. The afterlife, as envisioned through Enos's experience, is a continuum of conscious engagement, where each stage, each layer, and each pause serves a deliberate purpose in the preparation and ultimate placement of the soul. As Enos ventured further into the realms beyond, he encountered a dimension that defied common conceptions of punishment: hell. Unlike the simplistic portrayals that often depict it as a uniform plane of fire and suffering, Enos saw a reality that was profoundly heterogeneous. Hell was not a singular, undifferentiated space of torment. It was composed of multiple zones, each with distinct characteristics and purposes, each reflecting different facets of the soul's past actions. Some regions were marked by profound isolation, spaces where the soul existed cut off from light, from community, and from any external reference. In these zones, the feeling of separation itself became a primary experience, compelling the soul to confront its own nature without distraction, without the possibility of evasion. Other areas resembled the intermediary zones he had previously traversed, spaces of waiting rather than active punishment. Souls were neither free nor actively tormented. They lingered in a suspended state, aware of their condition and anticipating what was to come. Time, as understood in the mortal realm, had no purchase here. Moments stretched endlessly, allowing the consciousness to review, reassess, and reflect upon every choice, action, and thought that had contributed to the present condition. In these regions, the first encounter with consequence was not physical suffering, but the inescapable weight of memory and self-awareness. The soul, confronted with the totality of its life, could not hide from its decisions or from the implications of its existence. This was punishment of a profoundly internal nature, psychological, moral, and existential rather than corporeal. Deeper into the territories of hell, Enos observed zones where explicit retribution occurred, yet even these were not uniform. Each soul seemed to experience consequences uniquely tailored to its own past. No blanket punishment applied to all, no one-size-fits-all torment. The suffering reflected the choices, actions, and moral trajectory of the individual, making each experience a mirror of the life once lived. It was as if the soul carried within itself the seed of its own hell, a self-generated realm of accountability and recognition. This personalized aspect of retribution emphasized a fundamental principle. External imposition of punishment was secondary, if not irrelevant. True consequence emanated from the soul itself, arising from its intrinsic nature and the cumulative weight of its past. Perhaps the most remarkable revelation for Enos was the realization that the boundaries separating these realms were not absolute. Heaven and hell, though distinct in character, were part of a larger integrated system in which zones of light, shadow, and waiting coexisted and overlapped. There was a fluidity between states, a permeability that defied rigid dichotomies. In some areas, rays of light penetrated spaces otherwise dominated by darkness, suggesting the presence of hope or potential even in the most isolated corners. Conversely, zones of clarity or illumination occasionally bore subtle traces of tension or disquiet, hinting at the latent consequences of choices, yet unexamined. These intersections created a complex topology in which souls could sense the proximity of other realities, the influence of states beyond their immediate perception, and the interconnectedness of all existence within this grand system. This lack of absolute demarcation held profound philosophical implications. If heaven and hell were not entirely separate, then the posthumous journey was less a matter of reaching a destination than it was a process of alignment with one's own nature. Souls were placed not randomly or arbitrarily, but according to the correspondence between their intrinsic character and the surrounding structures. The interplay between light and darkness, freedom and constraint, reflection and consequence, all functioned as components of an encompassing system, one that operated with consistency, order, and purpose. The distinction between reward and punishment, therefore, was less about external imposition and more about the natural unfolding of each soul's inherent qualities within a designed framework. Enos witnessed how this systemic integration transformed the experience of afterlife. There were no sharp lines, no definitive points where heaven began and hell ended. Instead, existence flowed through gradients, with zones of illumination and shadow interacting, influencing, and informing one another. Souls could perceive, at least partially, their relative position within this continuum, and this perception itself carried moral and existential weight. The afterlife was not a simple correctional system or a cosmic scoreboard. It was an ongoing process in which consciousness, recognition, and alignment with the fundamental order determined the trajectory and quality of posthumous experience. Moreover, this observation redefined the nature of moral consequence. If boundaries were permeable and states interconnected, then actions in life could be seen as building the architecture of posthumous experience. The soul was never entirely separate from its environment, rather it was both shaped by and shaping the broader system. Heaven and hell became less about categorical reward or punishment and more about relational states, reflections of the ongoing interplay between a soul's essence and the larger structure it inhabited. This meant that the journey after death, while structured, was dynamic. The soul's qualities, choices, and awareness determined how it experienced, navigated, and evolved through these layers, making the afterlife a continuum of consciousness rather than a binary endpoint. Enos's encounter with hell, in conjunction with his observations of heaven, illuminated a profound truth. The afterlife is an integrated system where light and shadow coexist, where states of preparation, reflection, and consequence interact, and where the soul's inherent nature dictates its path and experience. The seeming dichotomy between heaven and hell is ultimately a reflection of human perception rather than an absolute cosmic separation. The spaces themselves are designed to elicit awareness, introspection, and alignment with the underlying principles of existence, emphasizing that judgment is not merely imposed externally but emerges from the congruence, or lack thereof, between the soul's inner reality and the structure of the posthumous system. In this way, the journey through heaven, the intermediary waiting zones, and hell is a continuum in which every soul is inevitably confronted with the reality of its own being. Enos's revelations suggest that moral and existential truths are embedded in the architecture of existence itself, where reward, punishment, and reflection are interwoven, inseparable, and inextricably tied to consciousness. The permeability between realms reinforces the idea that the afterlife is not merely a place to be reached, but a state to be inhabited, a reflection of who the soul has become, in alignment with both its own nature and the greater cosmic order. As Enos continued to traverse these intricate realms, one revelation emerged with ever-increasing clarity. Judgment was not a singular event or instantaneous decree. It was not, as human imagination often supposes, a celestial courtroom where a verdict is pronounced immediately upon death. Rather, judgment unfolded as a gradual, deliberate process, a continuum that demanded full engagement from the soul itself. In these posthumous spaces, the soul was compelled to look back upon the entirety of its life with unflinching attention. Every decision, every thought, every deed, no matter how small or hidden, was laid bare before its own consciousness. There was no external adjudicator imposing verdicts. Instead, the soul became both witness and arbiter, confronting the raw, unembellished truth of its existence. In this sense, the judgment was profoundly internal. The soul judged itself, and in doing so, participated actively in its own reckoning. The mechanics of this process were unlike anything familiar in mortal experience. Time, as it had been understood in the earthly realm, seemed both suspended and amplified. Moments of reflection could stretch indefinitely, allowing the soul to examine and re-examine its actions with perfect clarity. In these reflections, no rationalizations or excuses could survive. The soul could not hide, distort, or evade the consequences of its own choices. Memory, conscience, and self-awareness coalesced into a form of living judgment, one in which understanding and acknowledgement replaced the need for external punishment. The weight of self-recognition, the intimate confrontation with what one had truly done and thought, became the first and most profound form of reckoning. It was here that the process of judgment began, not as an event imposed from without, but as a revelation emerging from within, structured by the very nature of the soul itself. What Enos observed further was that this process was not uniform across all souls. Each soul's journey through reflection and recognition was tailored to its unique composition, its accumulated experiences, and its intrinsic nature. Some souls confronted guilt and regret more sharply, others found clarity or acceptance sooner. The system was not arbitrary, but deeply attuned to the character and history of the individual. It revealed a universal principle. Accountability arises not primarily from external imposition, but from alignment with one's own essence and the natural consequences of living. In this framework, judgment was inseparable from self-knowledge. The soul could not be evaluated apart from its internal processes. The afterlife, in this view, became a space where consciousness itself functioned as the medium of justice. Closely connected to this understanding of judgment was a profound insight into the very nature of existence after death. The soul does not go to a location in the conventional sense. There is no singular endpoint, no finite destination where one is deposited like a traveler arriving at a terminus. Rather, the soul transitions into a state, an existence defined not by physical coordinates, but by alignment with its own nature and the broader cosmic order. This state reflects the culmination of the life lived, the totality of choices, awareness, and consciousness developed during mortal existence. Each soul naturally settles into the position that corresponds with its essence, inhabiting a space that is simultaneously intrinsic and relational. Heaven and hell, light and shadow, reward and consequence, all are experienced not as imposed realities, but as natural extensions of what the soul has already become. Enos perceived that this state-based existence had significant implications for the understanding of posthumous reality. It underscored the continuity between life and afterlife, demonstrating that death is less a threshold than a transformation, a shift from temporal, corporeal existence into an enduring, conscious state of being. The system of layers, intermediary zones, and individualized consequences ensured that no soul was misplaced or overlooked. Every soul occupied its appropriate position, reflecting both its personal development and its intrinsic alignment with the larger order. In this sense, the afterlife was not a matter of external enforcement, but an unfolding of internal coherence. The soul's own qualities dictated its placement and experience. This realization also reframed the relationship between human actions and eternal outcomes. If the soul's posthumous state emerges from its internal alignment and the cumulative weight of its choices, then every moment of life carries significance beyond the temporal. Thought, intention, and deed are not ephemeral. They form the architecture of future consciousness. Each decision contributes to the soul's orientation within the complex system of existence that Enos witnessed. The moral and existential consequences of life, therefore, are continuous, not delayed. They begin during mortal existence and extend seamlessly into the state that follows. Death is not a reset, a point of evaluation, or a sudden revelation. It is the gateway into a continuum where the essence of the soul finds its natural manifestation. Enos's observations offer a profound perspective on personal responsibility and the nature of being. The soul is not passive, it is active, engaged, and self-determining. Judgment, consequence, and placement are inseparable from consciousness itself. Each individual crafts, through living, the structure within which they will exist after death. Heaven and hell, light and shadow, reward and suffering are therefore not merely external impositions, but reflections of intrinsic reality. The posthumous state is a mirror of one's life, a direct continuation of internal development, where the alignment between character, choice, and cosmic order defines the soul's position and experience. Through this lens, the afterlife becomes less an abstract reward-punishment dichotomy and more a profound system of continuity and self-realization. The process of judgment, the transition into a posthumous state, and the ultimate settlement into one's correct position illustrate a universe in which moral, existential, and spiritual principles are inseparably woven into the fabric of existence. The soul is never passive. It participates actively in shaping its destiny, experiencing the consequences of life through the lens of its own consciousness. Enos's journey, as a witness to these truths, reveals that the afterlife is less about physical locations or imposed decrees and more about the natural unfolding of the self in accordance with fundamental principles of order, awareness, and alignment. Ultimately, the insights provided by Enos emphasize that life and afterlife are intrinsically connected. Death is not an abrupt cessation, but a transition into a state of being where every soul inhabits the space appropriate to its own essence. Judgment unfolds as a process, internalized and self-generated, and the soul's position reflects its alignment with the universal order. In this understanding, the afterlife is a continuation, a state, and a process, a complex and conscious reality where the soul becomes the architect of its own eternal existence, and the consequences of life are revealed not externally, but through the unfolding of self-awareness and intrinsic alignment. As Enos's journey through the layers of heaven, the intermediary zones, and the multifaceted regions of hell came into focus, it became increasingly evident that the implications of his experiences extended far beyond the afterlife itself. They were not merely abstract metaphysical concepts, but carried a profound relevance for life in the modern world. Today, people live at an unprecedented pace, constantly moving from one obligation to another, chasing goals, deadlines, and fleeting pleasures. In such a fast-moving environment, self-reflection often becomes a rare luxury. Many focus on immediate concerns, career advancement, material success, or social validation, while failing to pause and consider the broader consequences of their actions, choices, and internal states. Enos's narrative serves as a stark reminder that the journey of the soul does not begin at the moment of death. Rather, it begins the instant life begins, and every thought, decision, and action contributes to the architecture of posthumous existence. The process that determines the soul's ultimate alignment with the cosmic order is already underway, embedded in the rhythms and patterns of daily living. The warnings inherent in Enos's story are both subtle and urgent. If the soul's position after death is determined by the qualities it cultivates during life, then the most perilous ignorance is not fear of mortality, but the failure to understand oneself in the present. The modern tendency to live distracted, to defer reflection, or to rationalize choices without examining their deeper meaning is a path that allows the gradual accumulation of unexamined consequences. In the eyes of Enos, such a life, though outwardly ordinary, is fraught with risk. Each unacknowledged choice builds the structure of the self in ways that will be unavoidable in the posthumous journey. The intermediary zones, where reflection and self-awareness first occur, underscore this point. Judgment is not imposed externally, but emerges naturally from what has already been lived. Thus, living without awareness is equivalent to walking into a waiting room of realization unprepared, forced to confront the totality of oneself without prior preparation. Enos's observations bring clarity to a profound existential truth. Heaven and hell are not destinations handed down as rewards or punishments, but are the consequences of how one has lived, how one has cultivated consciousness, and how one has acted in alignment with intrinsic and universal principles. Every moment, every interaction, and every decision becomes a thread in the intricate tapestry of the soul. Life, in this view, is less about immediate gratification or external validation than about the formation of being. an ongoing shaping of the essence that will ultimately determine posthumous placement. The process of becoming begins immediately and proceeds continuously, emphasizing that moral and existential awareness cannot be postponed. In this way, Enos's journey is both a mirror and a guide, urging contemporary audiences to consider the hidden dimensions of their everyday choices. It is within this framework that the greatest fear of existence emerges, not death itself, but the possibility of failing to recognize the trajectory of one's own life. Enos's story underscores that it is possible to reach the threshold of mortality without awareness of the self that has been constructed, without understanding the cumulative impact of choices and actions. The true peril is the absence of reflection, the unconscious drift toward states of being whose implications are fully realized only in the posthumous realm. The narrative suggests that the most profound responsibility, the most pressing challenge, is the cultivation of self-knowledge and the deliberate shaping of character in the present. Each day, each action, and each choice is an active contribution to the state the soul will eventually inhabit, making conscious engagement an imperative. Ultimately, this leads to a radical reorientation of perspective. The afterlife, rather than being an external system of reward and punishment, is a continuation and reflection of life itself. Heaven and hell, light and darkness, liberation and constraint are not destinations imposed by external forces, but emergent states shaped by the cumulative character of the soul. Judgment is a process, beginning in life and continuing beyond death, realized through awareness, reflection, and alignment with the intrinsic order. The soul becomes its own judge, its own guide, and its own inhabitant in the afterlife. This insight reframes the notion of morality and existence. The significance of life is not solely in accomplishments, accolades, or possessions, but in the formation of being and the conscientious engagement with one's own inner and outer reality. In conclusion, the story of Enos challenges us to reconsider the most fundamental assumptions about life and death. Heaven and hell are not arbitrary endpoints. They are not assigned based on a singular event or external decree. They are the natural outcomes of the life we live, the character we cultivate, and the awareness we achieve. The truly unsettling reality is not mortality, but the possibility that one may reach the end of life without understanding who one has become. The ultimate question is not theoretical or distant. It is immediate and urgent. Are you living as though your life is already under scrutiny? Are your choices and actions aligned with the essence you wish to cultivate, or are they left unexamined, accumulating consequences in silence? For modern audiences, the message is clear. Self-reflection, moral awareness, and conscious engagement are not optional. They are the essential practices that define the trajectory of the soul. The posthumous journey described by Enos is a mirror of our current lives, emphasizing that judgment begins now, not after death. Each thought, decision, and action contributes to the state we will inhabit, making every moment of awareness and intentionality crucial. If this reflection resonates with you, consider pausing amidst the busyness of daily life to examine your own choices and intentions. Contemplate the subtle ways your actions shape your inner self and the consequences they may carry beyond the temporal world. Life is not merely a sequence of external achievements, but a continuous process of becoming, a preparation for the state of consciousness that follows. By cultivating awareness, reflection, and intentionality today, we participate in the creation of our own posthumous state, aligning our being with the principles of order, understanding, and moral clarity illuminated by Enos's journey. And if you found this exploration meaningful, make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us for more insights into these ancient narratives and their relevance to the modern world. By doing so, you can continue the journey, examining not only the mysteries of the afterlife, but also the profound reflections on life, choice, and consciousness that these stories offer. Remember, The lessons of Enos are not distant. They begin in the present, in every decision, every moment of awareness, and every reflection upon who we are becoming. Ask yourself honestly, are you living as if you will be judged? And are you aware of the soul you are shaping with every passing day?